So his advice to me was always, don't look the victims in the eyes. From the time I was able to hold a lacrosse stick until about 6th grade, I played boys lacrosse. I had to have my ponytail or my braid tucked in the helmet so that no one knew I was a girl. A woman who was a Newsday delivery woman that was hit head on by a drunk driver.
Welcome to Celebrating Justice, presented by the Trial Lawyers Journal and Cloudlex, the next-gen legal cloud platform built exclusively for personal injury law. Get inspired by the nation's top trial lawyers and share in the stories that shape our pursuit of justice. Follow the podcast and join our community at triallawyersjournal.com. Now here's your host, editor of TLJ and VP of Marketing at Cloudlex, Chad Sands.
Welcome back, friends, to Celebrating Justice. In this episode, we're joined by trial lawyer and former Suffolk County ADA, Maggie Bopp. Growing up alongside her 4 brothers, Maggie's competitive spirit was shaped early on, and her passion for advocating on behalf of victims led her from the Vehicular Crime Bureau to her current role pursuing justice for plaintiffs. To get to the stories behind her journey, I asked her, why did you want to become a trial lawyer?
I come from a family historically of law enforcement. Both of my grandfathers fought in World War II. My paternal grandfather was drafted in 1943. And my maternal grandfather was actually in the British Army and fought against the Nazis. So that kind of started it. And my grandfather was in law enforcement, both as a police officer, which he eventually was promoted to inspector when he retired, but also a detective investigator for the Suffolk County District Attorney's Office. And that ranged from 1942 until about 1977, when he did retire. My father is a village justice of the town I grew up in, born and raised in Lindenhurst, since 1990. And he's also a former assistant district attorney of Suffolk County for about 4 years. I myself was an assistant district attorney for 13 years. My youngest brother is currently an assistant district attorney.
Oh, wow.
For the past almost 10 years. He's also a captain in the U.S. Army for Army JAG. I have 4 brothers, and another one is a pilot. He's in the aviation unit for the Suffolk County Police Department. He's also a U.S. Marine Corps lieutenant colonel who flies helicopters and also small planes. Most recently, he's taken on a position flying small planes, but he did 4 tours and has been in since 2002, I believe, is when he went to officer training school. I have another brother who's a New York State police trooper. He's been doing that. Before that, he was Southampton Town for a little bit, police. He also him and his wife own and run a brewery in Lindenhurst. And then I have another brother who's a union plumber. So
okay, so there's like a tradesman out there. They're not all Army or former.
Correct. My great grandfather on my dad's side was a plumber, and his family before him. So it's one way or the other. You follow family history.
Yes, it sounds like it.
So there's a very heavy law enforcement and just kind of justice, doing the right thing in our family.
So that's in the blood. Did you go into law enforcement, or what was your journey into the courtroom?
So I considered going into law enforcement through the FBI route, which what I wanted to do would have required a JD law degree, no matter what. And then by the time I was ready to do it, I was starting a family, and my husband thought I was crazy for taking on something else and having to be away for months at a time for training and then follow-up stuff. So I made the decision to just keep doing what I was doing. And at that time, I was already in the district attorney's office and loved every single second of it. So I was very happy where I was, and I wasn't in any real itch to get out of that.
Did you watch Silence of the Lambs and you wanted to be Clarice and join the FBI, or?
I think so. I think that was actually my motivation. And you know what it was too? And this is going to sound so silly, but one of my favorite movies is Point Break, and Johnny Utah, he's an FBI agent. It was It was cool.
The quarterback, the FBI informant. So, real quick, your time as the ADA, this feels very SVU, Law and Order, the Vehicle Crime Bureau. Tell me a little bit about the Vehicle Crime Bureau and what you did there.
In 2015, I was in the Case Advisory Bureau, it's kind of like the baby felony bureau. It's your introduction to felony cases, putting them in the grand jury, pleading them out, things along those lines, but no real heavy lifting with regard to specific cases. I was asked to jump on an aggravated vehicular homicide with a felony ADA, and it had to do with a woman who was a Newsday delivery woman that was hit head on by a drunk driver out in Hampton Bays. And I sat with this ADA and we instantly clicked. We're both type A. He's a little crazy. I'm a little crazy. We had a great time prepping the case, getting it ready and just kind of making sure both of us were ready. He held my hand, making sure that I was prepared to handle not only witnesses, but the opening statement on this huge case. So that was kind of my introduction. And next thing I knew, I was promoted to the Vehicular Crime Bureau. And that was kind of the start. And I was there from 2015 until I left the DA's office in 2023.
This dedication to justice that runs in your blood and Army, commitment to service, law enforcement. What makes you unique as a trial lawyer compared to all the other guys and girls out there?
So again, it kind of goes back to my family roots. Having 4 brothers, as you could imagine, it was a bit of controlled chaos in our house. You followed the rules. And if you didn't follow the rules, you had to be faster than the next person in line to avoid getting in trouble. But I was essentially, being the only girl in the family, I was the unofficial lawyer. I would see when one brother was doing something to the other, and try to mediate the situation or break up a fight. It was always something with them. One of my brothers hit the other brother in his face with a lacrosse shaft that 2 teeth came out. And, there was a lot going on in our house. So I think I was always, because I wasn't one of the boys, I kind of took on the role of supervising, counseling, mediating between all 4 of them. So it was one of those things that I realized it throughout my childhood and then my adulthood, that I can't necessarily keep my mouth shut with certain things. If I see somebody getting picked on, I'm saying something. If I see someone doing something wrong, I'm certainly judging their actions. One of my best friends since middle school is my best friend because she had an incident where someone was using derogatory slurs against her, and I was horrified by it and stuck up for her. And from then on out, we were best friends.
It sounds like your family and you are the type of people who, would run into a burning building to save somebody's life. And it's just kind of ingrained in your DNA. And you've taken that into the courtroom and advocating for your clients.
Yeah. But it's also one of those things too, growing up in a family. I mean, we're all athletes, my brothers and I. My dad actually was a Division I lacrosse player at Rutgers. He started the boys lacrosse league in Lindenhurst, and there wasn't a girls lacrosse league. So from the time I was able to hold a lacrosse stick until about 6th grade, I played boys lacrosse. And the condition that I had to abide by was I had to have my ponytail or my braid tucked in the helmet so that no one knew I was a girl, because my brothers were going to be embarrassed. But, there was always one of those things where we were always competing against each other, whether it was who's the fastest, who's the strongest, the funniest, who's the favorite. Yeah. So, by the time there was a girls' league, I was in 6th grade and I fought tooth and nail not to join because I was so used to playing with my brothers and their friends and my dad coaching and the way that he coached. It gave me an edge. I played much different than the typical training of girls lacrosse at the time. I was more aggressive. I cradled a different way. I just played a different way. And that kind of gave me an edge over everyone else, which led me to a Division I scholarship at Rutgers, which I loved every single second of. So that competitive edge that definitely gives me an advantage in the courtroom as a female attorney, because you walk in and you don't ever want to be judged as, oh, here comes the dumb blonde, Yeah. So I go in with the attitude of try me.
Are you in the middle then in terms of your brothers and your age?
I'm second.
Okay.
So
second to the oldest.
Second oldest, yes.
Okay, with two youngers.
Three youngers.
Three younger brothers. Four brothers total. So I'm the youngest of three brothers.
Okay.
And I definitely can relate to trying to just tag along or keep up and stay competitive. And if you guys are playing basketball, well, I want to play basketball. And ultimately, I did think it gave me better skills, and you had to step up, right? You played up to just because you wanted to be on the court or be involved.
Absolutely. I mean, I remember trying to convince my parents to let me play on the Little League football team because I could throw a spiral better than my brothers. And their compromise was I joined cheerleading. So
you can be a part of the sport. But.
Yeah. But also, too, on the same breath of having some type of unique feature, I bartended in the Hamptons for 10 years. Once I graduated law school and got a job with the DA's office, I obviously couldn't serve alcohol anymore. But that was an unbelievable jury pool.
Yeah.
You know, I came across all different people from all different wakes of life. And honestly, a lot of them, they just wanted to be heard. So it took a lot of listening and just speaking to people, understanding who they were and why they were that way, and successes they've had and losses they've had. And based on that, you could deal with anybody. If you can handle a high volume bar, nightclub, or even just the local small bar where you're serving Guinness to the the local principal, like it's just kind of one of those things. Like I said, people just want to be heard, whether it's jurors during voir dire, whether it's a victim on the stand, or an attorney, a trial attorney, delivering a summation. Just want to be heard. This is my side. These are the facts that support it. This is why I need you to listen to me.
I've interviewed former taxi cab drivers. I've also seen a lot of advice in terms of young associates, maybe not take an internship at a law firm yet, but go take acting lessons or be a server at a restaurant and build those people skills, because that's what you need as a trial lawyer.
And you need to find a way to connect to the jurors. You can't just stand there in a nice suit and expect them to have any empathy or compassion for you or your client if you don't find that connection, whatever it may be. You have to tear those walls down and get right to the evidence.
Yes. So speaking of jurors, let's discuss, and I know it's hard to choose one, but could you share a story about a case that really had a significant impact on you?
Yes. So when I was 7 months pregnant with my now 3-year-old, I was called out to a scene in the Vehicular Crime Bureau close to my home. And I got a call from the sergeant of the police department. And he said, "We have 4 dead." And I said, "Oh God, okay, I'm on my way." So I get to the scene and it was horrific. One car's upside down. The other car is just smashed. It was an Uber. The driver of the Uber was killed, the front seat passenger, and 2 rear seat passengers with another passenger seriously injured. And it was just heartbreaking because think of how many times you've taken an Uber out to or from wherever you're going. And your biggest worry is, well, at least I'm not drinking and driving. And whatever it may be, I'm not getting in the car with someone who's drinking and driving. I'm calling an Uber to get to and from where I want to go safely, back to my family, whatever it may be. But in this instance, the other driver had smoked an enormous amount of marijuana and was speeding on a residential roadway when he should not have been speeding. And I'm talking way over the speed limit, lost control of the car and hit the Uber head on. And the 4 passengers were young, successful college graduates that were just starting their lives. And the hardest part for me about that case was the fact that the defendant, who we were in the middle of getting warrants and we had detectives at the hospital monitoring, he ended up passing away. So that you can't charge anybody criminally with that. Who's there to answer for his actions? So that was something where I felt like justice was stolen from those victims and their families. I felt as though they deserved more than that. They deserved answers, and they're never going to get it. Even the officers that responded to the scene, I mean, they've never seen anything like that. This was towards the end of my career in vehicular crime, I had seen horrible scenes. And I mean, it certainly shook me, but you could tell that some of these young cops had never seen anything like this. And they were all thinking the same thing. Could have been me. It could have been my family member, a friend, anything. So that one has stuck with me, especially I drive by the area all the time. And it's just, you can't help but get a little angry for the decisions that were made that day.
What happened with the case? Like, could you not move forward? I mean, I guess there was no recourse, right?
There was no one to prosecute. He's dead. I mean, you can move forward civilly, but that's not, no one's answering for that individual's actions and decisions on that night and the consequences that the victim and the victim's families have to live with for the rest of their lives. Every single holiday, every birthday, everything, just wondering why. And having those answers just out in the ether and never answered is just something that I, as a prosecutor at the time, I just wished I could have given them.
As part of your time with the ADA and this Vehicular Crime Bureau, did you have to build up a barrier because you're showing up on these scenes? Did you slowly build up a system to kind of cope with that?
So my brother, John, who's in the Marine Corps, who at the time had, been to Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, his advice to me was, because the victims, if they had passed at the scene, they were left there so that the conclusion of the case, the investigation, the medical examiner's office to come. So his advice to me was always, don't look the victims in the eyes. Don't look them in the eyes, because then it's real, and that's where it will get you. So thankfully, I'm not a very emotional person to begin with, but I was able to compartmentalize the horror and the empathy I had for the phone call, the detective visit that the family members were soon going to receive. And I just had to put it aside, because the most important thing was building the case. And I treat every single case to this day as though it is a family member, a friend. I treat the case the way I would want it to be treated. So, you can't stand at a crime scene and get emotional and hysterical, and you're going to miss something. So you kind of have to just tunnel vision, look at what's going on, focus on that. And I'm glad that I had started it before kids, because I think once I had my kids, there was a bit of a change in me, where the first scene that I went to involving the death of a 4-year-old child, that was a hard one. And I called my brother John after and just said, I don't know if I can do this. I've never had an issue before. And now that I have children of my own, it hits in a different way.
Tell me a little bit about where you're at in your firm right now and how you've kind of brought that prosecutorial, I can't say that word, your background and from the ADA on the prosecutor side into what you do now.
I came over to my firm in April of 2023. So I've been here almost 2 years, and I came over here through an inquest by my bureau chief in the Vehicular Crime Bureau. He had come about a little over a year before me, and, had sent me a text inquiring, hey, do you know anybody that's looking? Hint, hint, wink, wink. And I talked to him about it, and I talked to my husband and my dad, having made the move before himself. And it was just, I never thought of leaving the DA's office. I loved it. I had no intentions, but this was an opportunity that I could not turn down, both for myself, for my family, the experience, the reputation of the firm, and just, it was the right time. So I went back and forth for about 2 weeks, driving my husband nuts. Okay, I'm going to go. No, I'm not going to go. I'm going to stay. No, I'm going to go. I'm going to stay. But once I came in and interviewed and they offered me the job that same right then and there, it was like I almost didn't hear the words yes come out of my mouth as fast as they did. So I knew it was the right decision. And it has been unbelievable. I mean, within the first couple of weeks being here, I jumped on a trial with one of the senior partners, Motorcycle Mike, and we ended up getting a $1.4 million verdict in Suffolk County, which is, it's a pretty conservative jury pool, but our client was really hurt and she deserved every penny of it. So that was great. And since then, I've done numerous trials. I've done hearings, just being in the courtroom and handling civil work. It's different, but it's similar because we're still prosecuting cases. It's just at the civil level. And the one thing I love is being in the courtroom and being on trial. Sometimes defense attorneys or even adjusters will use that as a tactic, like, oh, you don't want to go to trial. And I'm like, yes, I do. Come on. Because at that point in time, when I'm having those conversations, I've already analyzed the case and I know whether it's a good case to bring to trial or not. I've seen real stuff go awry in the courtroom, whether it was myself or other attorneys that I've watched over the years. But if you're prepared, you're all good. You can never predict what a jury is going to do, but if you really focus on asking the right questions during voir dire and trying to kind of scope out who the good jurors and bad jurors are. But that was lessons taught to me in the DA's office. I can't tell you how many cases I tried at the misdemeanor and felony level, but big cases where they're serving serious time upstate. So prosecuting something on the civil level to get someone compensation for their injuries and issues, pain and suffering that they've had, it's a different mindset than putting someone away for an extended period of time.
You shared that story about kind of the one that got away where you couldn't, bring justice or hold accountability. Can you share a story where you were able to bring a verdict on another case?
Yes.
It really stuck with you?
Yes, absolutely. So this one case will stay with me forever. All of my cases will stay with me, but this one it was a lot of firsts for me. So like I had said before, I was in the Vehicular Crime Bureau in May of 2014. No, it was 2015, sorry. And I was on that trial with my colleague who taught me so much and then got promoted. I finished the trial. I got my box. I go to the bureau and I'm like, okay, what do I need to do? And they're like, all right, well, now you're going to be introduced to on-call. And on-call is every 7 to 8 weeks, I'm on call for the entire week, which means any calls that come in 24 hours a day involving criminality and either a death or serious injury, I have to put on a suit. I have to get in the car and I have to respond to that scene. So it was my husband's 35th birthday and it was already planned. I had about 50 people at the house hostessing. And I'm like, I can't drink, guys. I'm on call. I have to have my phone near me at all times. And I had never gotten a call at this point. I had been on the whole week. It was a Friday into a Saturday night. And my phone rings at 3:15 a.m. And it's the New York State Police. And there is a horrific crash on the Southern State Parkway, exit 40. So right before the Robert Moses 41 exit, and you need to get here right away. It's bad. Okay, here we go. I put my suit on. I head out the door. I had a county car. When you're on call, you get the county car for the week. So I had my little lights and sirens going and got to the scene. And hectic, crazy, chaotic, horrible. It doesn't even come close. It was an incident where there were a bunch of young adults that were leaving a party in Brentwood because the cops came and broke it up, that were all in their cars heading to Queens to go to another party. And there was a family who was leaving a church event with the young adults driving, like idiots on the Southern State at, 2 a.m, whatever it was. The one defendant lost control of the car and crashed into the rear driver's side of this family SUV where the gas tank was. So the mom gets out of the car because she can't wake her husband. And she realizes when she tries to open the doors that the doors were locked. And her 4-year-old and 8-year-old were in the car. And she watched her family burn to death. And the defendant, instead of stopping, helping, trying to break the windows like other passerbys did, but it was too late at that point. He got in one of his buddy's cars and fled. So I got to the scene where the dad and the two children were still in the car. They were being extricated from the car at that point, but they had been burned beyond recognition. It was awful. The 8-year-old boy had taken off his seatbelt to sit next to his 4-year-old sister. And the witnesses, the trauma that those witnesses, between the mom just screaming for help and everything. And, one of the witnesses had 3rd-degree burns on his hand from taking a tire iron and trying to smash through the window. So that one was one, that when I say it was firsts for me, it was the first scene where there were fatalities. It was the first scene involving children that were killed. It was the first scene with the New York State Police. I hadn't worked with them before. I mostly had worked with Suffolk County. And from there, it was the first with regard to doing what's called a pen ping to try to find out where the location of the defendant, where he had gone, what he had done. A lot of witnesses were screaming the license plate of the vehicle that took him from the scene. So they had a run on that. The defendant and his buddies had concocted a plan to go to Franklin Hospital. And that was the reason they had to leave the scene, because they had to get their buddy, who had a minor cut on his leg. I took a picture of it because that's how minor it was, to get him to Franklin Hospital, which they passed about 8 hospitals on the way there. Uh-huh. So there was a lot of investigation in this case. There was something that's called retrograde extrapolation. So when he was finally taken into custody, he ended up consenting to give his blood, and it was below the legal limit. But with retrograde extrapolation, you use something called the Widmore formula. And we were able to get, I think his blood alcohol was a 1.4. So the interesting part about that, once we had that information, we knew we had, all right, we can arrest him not just for leaving the scene, but now we have an aggravated vehicular homicide on our hands. And we also have this other driver. Can we charge him with anything, knowing he saw what was going on? Can we charge him? And we did. We charged him with leaving the scene of an incident as an e-felony. And throughout the process, it was a huge undertaking, not only for my bureau, for my office, for myself, but the New York State Police, months of investigation, cell phones, going to Queens to interview hundreds of people, because again, it was a party that was let out. So there was a ton of people on the roads. Everybody was stopping, taking videos. Actually, through those random cell phone videos, while the person taking the video is focused on the fire, they don't realize that they've captured unbelievable evidence of the defendant cleaning out the car, including taking a Patron bottle and throwing it in the woods right there, and hopping into the other defendant's vehicle and driving away. So once we were able to get that video in our hands, the Department of Transportation went with the New York State Police and headed right over to that location. And sure enough, what did we find? Bottle of Patron. So that went right to the lab for fingerprint testing, DNA analysis. Having that captured on video was so impactful, because you have this burning car behind you. You could hear the mom screaming, and this is what he's doing. He's concerned about himself, his choices, his decisions that led to these consequences, but he's still thinking, how can I get out of this? So there was really no remorse for him when prosecuting this case. You were there. You were one of the first ones there. You know what happened. You could have helped. Maybe nothing could have been done, but you didn't even try.
Yeah. They were standing there thinking about their next move and what they were going to do to get out of it.
Exactly. So, there was a lot that was done. It went to trial. I actually got married during the trial. It was during the prep. I got married on a Saturday, was back to work on a Monday. I postponed my honeymoon until the trial was over. It was a 6-week trial, probably about 6 months of prep, because we had over 100 witnesses on our proposed witness list. But yeah, 6 weeks in front of Judge Camacho. He was fantastic. And he was convicted of all charges. And his co-defendant eventually took a plea to the charge, and he was also sentenced.
Was the mom ever able to move forward with the civil case?
I don't know if she was able to move forward with the civil case. She testified in the grand jury, which was horrific, to the point that we made a very tough decision that she couldn't testify at trial. She wouldn't get through it. So the colleague who's now with us, he read her grand jury testimony into the record. And I don't know how he got through it, because there was not a dry eye in that courtroom. Everyone just felt through the words her pain, her anguish, her trauma, the horror. So I don't know what happened with her civil case, but she'll never be made whole. She'll never be the same. How could you?
At CloudLex, we understand the unique demands and opportunities that personal injury law firms face every day. That's why we've built a comprehensive platform designed exclusively for personal injury law. Our seamless case management, AI engine, litigation support, and record retrieval solutions empower you at every stage, from intake through settlement and beyond, helping you stay productive, organized, and focused on achieving successful outcomes for your clients. Explore what's possible at cloudlex.com. Now here is this episode's closing argument.
When I was in the district attorney's office in the Vehicular Crime Bureau, I got called out to a scene where a Subaru was going well over 100 miles an hour on the Long Island Expressway service road. And he just blew a red light that was captured on a red light camera, striking a Ford pickup that had two gentlemen in it. It was approximately 4 a.m. They were on their way home from work and were actually making a pit stop to pick up milk because the passenger had 4 children and his wife had texted him earlier to please pick up milk on his way home. He was killed instantly, and the driver of that vehicle was ejected. The defendant was wedged in the vehicle under the steering wheel with fractures to both of his legs. He was taken to the emergency room. We were able to get a blood sample. He was intoxicated. But that started a very interesting portion of the case, because the defendant, while he did hit his head and he had some head trauma, when he was released from the hospital and arraigned on the charges, he appeared in a wheelchair, nonverbal, kind of drooling. And I had an inkling that something was off. So besides the fact that I had a victim who was in the hospital with his entire left side fractured from, shoulder down to his feet, I had a father of 4 who was dead. I had his widow, who was just absolutely beside herself because they were a young couple. They were in their 20s. I had to deal with this defendant and the fact that I knew something was off. So I spoke to some of the detectives and we made a decision to put a pole camera up on the LIPA pole in front of his house. Sure enough, within seconds of this camera going live, the defendant is walking around his yard. He's helping set up a yard sale. He's carrying bins for the yard sale. One of the dates of his court appearance, I happened to be watching that morning, seeing him putting his wheelchair into the back of the car and getting into the car, and his wife driving him over to the courthouse. He appeared into the courthouse in his wheelchair, again, nonverbal, drooling on himself. And I showed the video to the defense attorney. I showed the video to the judge, who then reprimanded this individual, showing him the video. He never broke character. He even, during one of his examinations with a doctor to see if he was fit to proceed to trial, urinated himself. He took a full commitment to this invalid status. This was during COVID when the case made its way to trial. He was put in jail on the date that I presented the video to the judge. Miraculously, he came out of his invalid state and was able to speak and make phone calls. We get to trial and the defendant doesn't show up the first day. We had to pick a jury with masks on. They had shields. and having our victim's widow in the courtroom and hearing her wails from the back of the courtroom was just heart-wrenching, with those 4 little babies and this guy who prolonged the case for almost 2 years trying to fake being an invalid. But we got through it. He was convicted. It was brought up on appeal recently because of the masks, and it was upheld. But that's one of those things where, as trial attorneys, you have to trust your instincts. You have to trust your gut, because in this instance, I just knew something wasn't right, and I needed to get to the bottom of it. And I'm glad that I did, because I don't know where that case would be right now. I don't know what answers or closure the family of our victims would have. And I don't know if he would be in upstate prison right now. That's an extremely important characteristic to have. You got to trust yourself so that you trust your case.
That was trial lawyer Maggie Bopp. Thanks for sharing your stories. To learn more about Maggie, visit her firm's website, rglzlaw.com. All right, I'm Chad Sands. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
You've been listening to Celebrating Justice, presented by Cloudlex and the Trial Lawyers Journal. Remember, the stories don't end here. Visit triallawyersjournal.com to become part of our community and keep the conversation going. And for a deeper dive into the tools that empower personal injury law firms, visit cloudlex.com/TLJ to learn more.